Hello, hi, and welcome to our Magic, Mystery, and Mayhem panel for Camp YA. I'm Karen. I'm one of our organizing team, and I'm here with Amie Kaufman and MK Lobb. Woohoo! Hey, hi guys. How are you doing today?
Hey.
Hi.
We
Good.
are in like
Excited.
three. We're talking over
Hey,
each
I
other
took a
already.
quiz and everything to join.
So, which
I
which team are you?
trout, and I liked the description. It told me that I was mysterious.
Ooh.
Ooh.
And in
Yeah.
typical me fashion, I just picked my favorite color and read nothing about them. So I
Yeah.
am
It's like
red.
it's a full personality
I'm
test, isn't
neither.
it?
So we have all three of our teams here then tonight. So thank you for joining us. We're really excited to have you here to talk about your books. And we are in three different time zones, just so that you all know. I think
Hmm.
what time is that at yours, Amie? Like
It's
9?
just gone 8 in the morning.
Oh,
What
I'm
about
at
you?
So
6
you'll see
tonight.
it get slowly lighter outside.
And you will see it get darker on me, presumably. I'm 6 o'clock, so yeah.
Yeah, 11 p.m. It's already dark, but hopefully this will stay the same. All right, fabulous. Just to kind of get us started, could you tell us a little bit about yourselves, just in case, anybody doesn't know you, and pitch us The Isles of the Gods and Seven Faceless Saints? Shall we start with you, Amie?
Sure. My name is Amie Kaufman. I'm the author of 19 sci-fi and fantasy books for middle grade and YA. Some of the ones that you guys may have heard of would be Illuminae and Aurora Rising, but there are many. Uh, we've learned on my recent visit to England that it is Arm Day every day when you're one of my readers. I had great fun with people coming with stacks of backlist, being like, well, you took long enough to get here and look how many there are now. My latest is The Isles of the Gods, which is a high seas fantasy. It's got 1920s vibes. It's got a rakish prince who seems like a real playboy, but is, of course, a screaming pile of vulnerability on the inside. But we don't get to that for a while. There's a sailor girl who has absolutely no time for him and finds him very annoying until she doesn't. And she ends up needing to save him if she is going to save the world from a war between the gods.
Dun, 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 dun. We'll definitely talk
Dun,
more
dun,
about that.
dun.
Of course, we have an hour, so
I'm won over
Yeah.
already. And I'm MK Lobb. I am a debut author from Canada. I do not have 19 backlist books, but I wish that I did. Seven Faceless Saints is my debut novel. It is a YA dark fantasy with kind of a murder mystery twist. It essentially takes place in a city where everyone believes in these seven saints, and each saint is associated with a different type of magic. And there are disciples that are kind of blessed by the saints. Except there's one type of saint that's considered evil, that's the Saint of Chaos, and he fell from grace some number of years ago. So anyone who believes in chaos is like a heretic, essentially. And the main characters, Roz and Damien, are childhood friends who got separated when Roz joined the rebellion and Damien went off to war. And of course, they reconnect because I love a complicated romance. They reconnect when they have to solve a series of murders. Damien wants to solve them for his job, and Roz wants to solve them for her own reasons. So they kind of combine forces, and I have basically put them in forced proximity to rekindle their very complicated romance.
Great. So we will definitely be talking about the romance later on, but I think
Mhm.
kind of having read both of your books, from the readers feeling like the really oppressive dark of the shrine in Umbratsu to like tasting the salt in the air about Sunny's ship, both of you really involved the reader in the story through like your physical world building. How did you decide on the setting and kind of develop that sense of immersion? Like any particular inspiration you'd like to share? Would you like to start, MK? I'm just gonna kind of like
Sure.
pick
Yeah,
you
go.
guys out, but feel free to, talk amongst yourselves.
No, that's smart. Otherwise, I think we'll all talk over each other.
Yeah.
Um, so the setting in Seven Faceless Saints is based on the city of Florence in Italy. And it was actually, and the reason for that is it used to be kind of a historical fantasy. And it's based on the guilds of Florence from the medieval era, starting at the end of the 1100s, more or less. And obviously, it didn't stay historical fantasy. It's now just a fantasy because it got too complicated, but that's still what inspired it. So essentially, this old guild system had 7 major guilds, and each had a specialty related to a certain craft. So I think one was like wool working, stuff like that. And so everybody who wasn't in one of these guilds was lesser, and there was a special like security detail that protected the guilds, protected their interests, and eventually there was an uprising against these guilds in that system, and that is what inspired my system in Seven Faceless Saints and the rebels that are kind of conspiring against it.
Mhm. I feel like you really kind of get that sense of the history, though. Like you really get the vibe, and it really feels like a scary place. I'm a wimp, so I was a little bit like,
A lot had to be
Yeah.
So I've heard that you will have some real life experience that kind of inspired some of the settings for the Isle of the Gods, Amie?
It did. Sorry, yeah, I was still stuck in Florence. Sorry, that one of my side specialties at uni was Renaissance Florence and like the aftermath of the guilds and the guild rules and stuff. So we could do an entire panel on that, but we're not going to because we are nerds, but we're not going to be that kind of nerd today.
Yeah, at the
That would
end,
be
if
for
we have extra
afterwards.
time.
We could always circle back. Yeah, I have a great story about rules about buttons on. Anyway, yes, the answer is yes, I do. But like MK, I think I've done the same thing. I've gone to a moment in history, and I think, in much the same way, it's not that it's actually in that moment in history. It's that when you're trying to create a setting and a world, having some kind of touchstone in our world, I think gives it a sense of consistency. It gives it a sense that runs through it because, like, I mean, we're all people, but we're all basically monkeys, and we've got all these things going on in the back of our brains that, are constantly assessing, do we trust people? Do we trust the information around us? Can we rely on it? Should we go to it? It's why sometimes you don't know why, but you don't trust someone and you're right. And I think you could also tell with an author, if their world building is skin deep, you mightn't know that. You mightn't spot the hole, but you kind of know that, like, it hasn't got that depth to it. It hasn't got the roots that go underground that you don't see. So I'll often start with something I know. In this case, I started with the 1920s because I'm a sailor, as you said, and so being on the sea is my jam. And I was in New York actually, and I was walking down the banks of the Hudson, and I saw a tall ship, like think like a Pirates of the Caribbean ship. And to this day, I do not know what it was there for. I assume it was like a tourist thing, but my little writer brain immediately went, "Oh, Pirates of the Caribbean take Manhattan, or is it time travel? How did it get here?" But I was so interested in like this image of this very old ship against this very, the skyscrapers behind it. And so I started looking into those old ships, and it turned out they were actually sailing cargo in our world until the 1920s, which was much later than I thought. But, like between the two world wars, you could like fly in a plane. I mean, maybe not a very reliable one, but you could do it. You could send a telegram, you could, see neon lights, and you could sail cargo on a tall ship. And then I thought, well, what would keep those tall ships sailing? Like what meant that they stopped? And it was reliability. And so then I thought, well, what could have kept them sailing? And because I'm that kind of nerd, I was like, well, elemental magicians who could control the wind and the water, that would keep them sailing. And so, a world and a kind of a 1920s inspired vibe and a magic system were all born all at once.
We just came together.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds really fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting that you said, like, so you talked about the immersive detail, and like, I love creating these worlds. I'm actually rubbish at describing them. My first drafts, it's like everything happens in a white space. And then I have to go through and actually really weave that detail in because it's just not my natural. We've all got things we're good at and things that we forget to do. Definitely not my natural place.
Well, at least you get it in the next passes because you definitely got it.
Yeah. MK is nodding at me in a way that speaks like kinship.
I get you, but like in the opposite sense, because I feel like mine are descriptions of worlds and nobody's talking.
So by our powers combined. Yeah. There's always something in the first draft, and then like I've just handed in the first draft of the sequel to Isles, and like people think it's concerning when I'm like, oh, it's very bad. It's totally unconcerning. Like, it's a first draft. It exists. It's done its job. It'll be good in the second draft and the third draft. It's not meant to be good yet.
So Your books are very different in tone. Well, the ones that we're talking about at the moment, anyway. But something that really struck me, especially when it comes to like the magic, is this theme of struggling with either being or not being chosen to have or to do magic. And kind of for a lot of your characters, the parallels that come with grief for those characters. Can you tell us a little bit about the magic systems and the development? I know, like, we already talked a little bit about the setup, but it'd be really nice to delve a little bit deeper. And was it also always part of the world? I mean, for Amie, for you, for the idea that kind of came with it. But what about for you, MK? How did that come about?
Um, so like I said, I had these Florentian guilds as kind of my setting initially, and they were each associated with one of those crafts, I guess you would call it. And I just had this idea of like it would be really cool if a world was split into guilds like that, but instead of these crafts, they each had a different magical power. Because I like to write fantasy, I like to insert magic wherever I can do it, right? So that's
Why not?
essentially
I mean,
When in doubt.
from. Yeah, put magic
magic.
in. But as people may or may not know, the saints are very closely intertwined with that magic. Um, and as Amie will also probably know, religion was super important in the way that the guilds functioned and the way that they were set up, and just in the way Florence was at the time, and most other places at the time. So I tried to kind of bring that darkly religious vibe and combine it with the magic system. Because I just love kind of a creepy city where there's people who believe sort of almost cultish things, and that's just the vibe that I was trying to go for because I love that. And so in terms of the characters,
Oh,
Damien, the male main character in the book, he is not chosen, not blessed by the saints. So he doesn't have any power. He's not given one of the saints different powers. So he really feels a sense of unworthiness in the eyes of the saints, I guess. So he doesn't feel connected to his dad, who does have magic, or the other disciples that do have magic. So Damien feels unworthy in the eyes of the saints. He feels unworthy in the eyes of his father. And so I think the main thing for me when I was building this world is that having that magic and religion intertwine and combining both of them to make Damien feel like he doesn't matter was sort of the backbone to his characterization, which I
oh,
feel
bless
bad.
them. Poor
But
Damien.
Truly an author. When you say that with such a giant smile, just making you feel worthless was really,
yeah, yeah,
probably went deep.
yeah. But meanwhile, we have Roz, who's the female main character, and she is a disciple. So she's a disciple of Patience, but she comes from a family of dissenters and former like rebels, essentially. So she has the opposite feeling as Damien. She feels like if she kind of leans into that, since she's betraying her dead father's memory, she's betraying the rebels that she's kind of aligned with. So they are both really touched by the magic system and the political system, but in opposite ways. So they're both feeling like they're unworthy within it and they don't fit in it. Um, and your question about whether I wrote it that way initially or if it kind of happened along the way, I knew the magic system was going to be like that and that it was going to be intertwined with the characterization as I wrote. And I think it kind of surprised me how deeply it became intertwined with them. So I feel like I'm the kind of person who writes characters and then they sort of show me who they are as I go. So the magic was always there, but how it affected them and the way that they interact with it kind of built as I wrote.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I do feel like that is such a like a core thing for both of them. It's that feeling of like not being right, no matter whether you're in or out. Like because there's that division, you know?
Win.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah. I
Amy.
mean, that's how you know that you've woven it in properly. It's like if you
Mm.
literally can't pull it out because it's so enmeshed in everything else, that's when you know that you've I don't know. I feel like readers often say like, how do you know when you're done? Actually, I guess it's probably writers who are saying, how do you know when you're done? And like the answer is like, when it's all woven together like this and you just couldn't remove any of the elements anymore. Like that's when you
Mhm.
figured out everything that needs to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. At least you hope.
Oh, look, there's always a hefty dose of hope. That's part of being a writer. My magic systems. So I suppose the basic version of it is that not everyone is a magician. Some people are. It's hereditary. And if you are born a magician, you're born with like a big thick green stripe that runs straight down your forearm like this, like someone's painted it on. And when you're about 5, so the first time that you wield your magic, it rearranges itself into a really intricate tattoo that shows what element you're affiliated with and by its complexity, how powerful you are. And the way that the magic works is you charm the spirits that are affiliated with each of the elements, and they've all got their own personality. So, water spirits are really playful, air spirits are quite haughty and like to be asked, fire spirits are like that friend that whispers a really bad idea in your ear and then is nowhere to be found when you are facing up to the consequences of executing that bad idea. It's like, we've all got that friend, sometimes we've all been that friend. And I've got 5 point of view characters, 2 of them are magicians. One is Prince Leander, and he is the most powerful magician on the Crescent Sea. He's a prince of the royal house of Alinor. He's the most eligible bachelor on the Crescent Sea. Different waistcoat for every course of the meal. He's a total playboy, constant marriage proposals. Everyone adores him. Definitely nothing could be wrong in his life, because how could it be when he's that handsome and that powerful? And then opposing him, we have Sally, who is the sailor. She is the only person that she or anyone she's ever spoken to has ever encountered who was born with a big fat green stripe down here, and that is what it is to this day. She's now in her late teens, and her magic never came in, and her failure and her difference is literally written on her body for everybody to see all the time. And her dad, in what she certainly perceives as an act of care and love, but readers may not, has spent her life dragging her from teacher to teacher to teacher, trying to get this magic to work, and it never has. So when I say she's my cranky girl protagonist, you may be beginning to divine some of the reasons for that. But
I mean,
of course,
you would,
yeah,
after a while, wouldn't you?
You'd start to feel something. But of course, he seems like he has it all, and like his magic is just sort of the cherry on top. And of course, he has a lot more going on than that. His big sister is the queen, and she and her wife rule the country. His second sister will be the one providing the heirs. He's number 3. What's he for? There's nothing he can do, and there's also no way to get out of it. So he has a lot going on the inside, and his magic in some ways forms part of his cage. Sally's magic is, well, we spend a lot of the book answering the question of Sally's magic, so I won't get too deep into it, but very mysterious.
Yeah. So kind of following up, not just in the magic system, but also like socially, a lot of both of you have and have not characters, as a lot of you have spoken to about it. And I feel like teenage characters question the world around them as well as themselves. And as such, I feel like themes of like social systems and justice make such sense. What was the inspiration for the social structures in your books? I know we've kind of touched on that with you, MK, so I don't know if Amie, if you want to maybe start on this one.
Yeah, sure. So when I'm creating a world, I'm often thinking about how is it the same as our world and how does it differ? And one of the things that I like to do with my fantasy or science fiction worlds is take a lot of things that are an issue in our world and norm them in those worlds. So, and then, pick the one that's going to stand out. And in this case, it was class. So this is a world where race is not important, gender is not important, sexuality is not important. Like, I think, as a queer author, I like to write worlds where just nobody cares. Like we need books that are about coming out, and we need books that are about it being difficult to be queer, and we need books that are about being joyful. But I think we also, another kind of activism is that kind of restful space of is just not a thing. And one of the reasons I norm all those things is to create that restful space. But another is because it allows you to then pick one and really go with it. And in this case, it was class. So, we've got Leander, who is the absolute epitome of the class season, our class system. There's that jet lag, our prince. And we have Sally, who, she's part of the merchant class. She's not, I wouldn't say she's lower class. But then we have these other characters who float around it. So we have, accompanying them, a bookworm who is, he's our self-insert, my friends. Like, he's a bookworm who did not want to go on a quest and was in the wrong place at the wrong time and would like to get off the ride if at all possible. And, the only thing he really packed to bring with him was his books. So
he might have been my favorite. I mean,
he's most people's favorite. But, the thing is, he is upper class. Like he's titled, his family are titled, his family are wealthy, but he's absolutely a prisoner of it. When we meet him, he's running away from an arranged marriage. So I thought the girls always run away. Why can't the boy run away for once? And, then we've got Jude, who used to go to school with Keegan and Leander, and his father is a part of their world, but his mother is not. And so when his father died and he got left with nothing, he ended up in the gutter. And, his perception, at least, is that everyone from that world abandoned him. And he's questioning now whether he was ever really a part of it. And then we've got Laskia, our villain, who just wants to set the world on fire, who was born with nothing and is determined to have everything. But all of their perceptions of class are important, and it's kind of one of the things I was the most interested in playing with in this book.
Yeah.
I love that. First of all, I think I never put into words, but I think subconsciously, when you're writing a world that's so sprawling, you have to kind of pick one that you're going to focus on, like you said. And that's a really good way to describe it. So obviously, I kind of did a similar sort of thing with the guilds and the ungilded. But I'm a former policy major, so I can't seem to build a political system that doesn't focus on like structural injustice of some sort. Um, so I think the guild system that I use that I explained before, it's kind of an ideal setting for creating characters or creating tension between characters who are in opposite sides of that. So I've got Roz, who essentially grew up as one of the unfavored, and that's everything she knows. And so she has this really deep-seated rage about what she doesn't have and what the people that she loves don't have. And then you've got Damien, who grew up with essentially everything because his dad had magic, his mom, well, she died, but his mom was high up as well. And so they're coming from two completely different spots. And I guess for me, it's an ideal way to set up as well a dual point of view romance or any dual point of view relationship, really, because you've got them coming from these two completely different sides of the structure, and that's kind of where they really clash. And they have, I think the main reason for that is they have such different ideas of what justice should look like because of the way that they've been raised. So obviously Damien's been raised within this palazzo system under his father, who's a general, and Roz has been raised by people that are sort of on the outskirts. And they're really influenced by that, obviously, as you would be. And I think it's interesting in the way that the characters develop because a lot of people, I think, believe Damien is doing a lot more of the bending when it comes to the character dynamic and what he believes. Which is true because he's coming from the side that sucks, essentially. Like he's coming from the top of the political structure. And he's already kind of partially there in terms of he's already questioning his faith in both the saints and kind of the powers that be. And Roz is the person who is probably going to rub people the wrong way sometimes because she's the one who's there to push him into opening his eyes in a way that's not comfortable. And yeah, so I think for me, it's just every part of the political system that I've created, I guess, in the Palazzo system is kind of coming together to drive these characters apart, but then bring them back together in the end. And now I've said so many things, I forgot the question, but I hope that I answered it.
Well, it actually perfectly leads into my next question, which is romance.
I was literally about to say, and this is why we need forced proximity, because otherwise they would march in two opposite directions, and that would be that.
Yes.
So, I know, that was like perfect. What am I even here for? It's great. I love it. So both Isles and Saints feature meaty romantic elements, even though the vibe and the tone of your books are very different. And I think in both cases, it really adds to the character arc because, as you say, Amie, they just do this. So talk us through the romance, please. What was your favorite part of the romance to write, maybe? That might be a fun bit to talk about.
you know what? Can I say first? Because I bet a lot of people who are listening like to write. I feel like this is the perfect example of why, if you hear someone's story and you think it sounds a lot like yours, don't panic. We always deliver that wisdom of like, don't worry, you'll write it the way you'll write it. But we're both essentially writing stories about, he comes from privilege, and doesn't understand, everything that he has. And she comes from, the working classes, for want of a better comparison. And, she's there to, point all of this out to him. And, they're sort of intellectual equals, but social opposites. And then they get trapped together and then they have to rely on each other. And, like technically, I guess that kind of sounds like the same spine of the same story, except they could not be more different. One is like a romp. No, like one is like a romp on the high seas and one is like, a moody, vibey, dark fat, like they're quite different. But I think, there's a reason that these things sometimes sound similar in their spines, and it's because we know what we love. And one of the things we love is, when you're writing romance, you take people who have no reason to want to be together and then keep forcing them back together. And I think in some ways, the favorite thing that I have to write in romances is fights and squabbles and, sort of banter that descends into insults, because when your characters aren't equal, that's one of the ways that you show that they are. When one of them technically has all the advantages in the world. And, again, in both our books, like I've got, well, I guess the prince has the money advantage, but they're sailing and Sally's the one who knows how to do that. And, we could say, well, Damien grew up in the Palazzo system and Roz is the one who's actually got what he really wishes, the skills he wishes he had. But you're sort of looking for all these ways to make them uneven and then just like let them fight because they're going to prove themselves equals over and over again. And I love, one of my favorite lines in Isles is Sally says to Leander, she just looks at him and goes, "Do you have any practical use?" And he goes, "Oh, people don't usually ask." And yeah.
What?
I mean, like there's lots of yearning and there's a cool nightclub scene where they kind of almost dance and all kinds of stuff. But the insults, honestly, my favorite thing to write in the romance.
Honestly, me too. I feel terrible saying that because people are always like, "What's your favorite part to write when you're writing?" Like, I guess I wouldn't call it I guess it is enemies to lovers, but they're not like actively trying to murder each other. They're enemies by opposition, I guess. They're on different sides, so they're technically enemies. But yeah, people say like, "Aren't you so happy when you get to the point of your book where the characters finally reconcile and kiss and make up?" And I'm like, "No, I hate that." I like when they're
Hating whatever.
yeah, like building the tension between them and outlining, at least when I'm writing dual point of view, outlining the reasons that they are mad at each other and don't trust one another, and going through their past in this case, because they were friends as children. Going through all of that and seeing how they see one another compared to how they used to see one another, and then how they find their way back to each other. Um, it's just so much fun when they are angry.
Right.
And then you get to kind of, like Amy said, you get to force them together and make them have a common goal, at least in some sense. And that's what kind of makes them see that maybe they're not as completely different as they thought they were, or maybe one of them will change, or both of them will. Um, and yeah, I think that's what I love about writing a romance like this, where you've got two people that are so different, and you're like, okay, well, we're gonna make you in love, whether you like it or not.
Just throw some insults at each other and you'll love each other by the end. It'll be great.
Yeah. Totally healthy and definitely how it always works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't take advice from my books for your real life relationship.
No.
It's fun to read about, and that's what we're here for. So,
Exactly.
So, apart from the protagonists, which I feel like we've got a bit of a hold on, were there any other characters that you loved writing? I mean, I may have some favorites. Jude, Deb. Any other favorites by any chance?
Go for it.
Oh, do you want me to go?
MK? Oh yeah, I forgot. Sorry.
I was having a deep think, that's all. Um, like, I think this book specifically is very Roz and Damien focused. Like, once we move into the second book, you get more of the side characters. They are there in this book, but it's not like they're playing a huge part yet. Um, And honestly, none of them are, like, fun to write because the book is fairly dark and none of them are very happy. But I have to say, I know you said you like Dev. I do sister that Damien is friends with. And he plays a very small part in this book, but he's also the only character, I think, in the whole book who might be, like, optimistic. And he's got kind of a sense of humor even though he does live in this messed up world and he's got dark past like everybody else that I've written. Um, but yeah, he's kind of the only character that I think exists in this series where he's kind of an optimist. He's kind of lighthearted, and I love that about him, even if he's not there that much in book one. So was it fun to
Aw.
write him? I feel bad for him mostly, but
Aw.
You gotta kill your
You need
darlings, isn't
one.
it? So,
Yeah. Is that what they meant by that? Hmm.
well, kill
Um,
them, be mean to them. That's what we all
yeah,
do.
terrible things.
Mhm.
I yeah, so I don't know, I'm kind of a weirdo. Like, you know how maybe you don't, maybe only I know this. So Aaron Sorkin famously writes for audiobook narrators because
Okay.
if you look at all my audiobook backlist, I've worked with the same narrators over and over again, and I actually hear them in my head now when I write. And so I loved writing Laskia because I knew from minute one that Donna Bella Mortel was going to be her narrator. And I mean, I have a long-standing relationship with my audiobook producer. So when we were emailing, I was like, I was thinking Donna Bella for Laskia. He was like, well, obviously. So, you know, it was her from minute one, and I could hear her really just like relishing these terrible murdery things that Laskia was going to be saying. You know, she's a gangster and she's desperate to kind of come up in the world and prove herself. And Donna Bella is like the nicest person you'll ever meet with a smile that takes up half her face, but she's great at playing that terrifying note. So I loved writing Laskia. Jude, of course, I loved writing. He's my private school boy who fell into the gutter. Um, it was occasionally traumatic. I did a thing to my YouTube algorithm by looking up bare knuckle boxing to write for Jude. I mean, obviously, over this many books, I've Googled a lot of stuff. That was definitely one of the more traumatic search results for me personally. Don't recommend don't recommend taking a look.
Now I'm
And you know, yeah, I just look. If you do, I'll tell you what I tell everyone I say this to, which is afterwards, just be ready to type quokka into your YouTube algorithm. You know, they're those beautiful little Australian marsupials with a little smile, and it'll cleanse YouTube for you. It'll be like, that terrible violent person has left and someone lovely is here now. Let us refresh what we're providing. And
I can't wait.
his most traumatic moment of the whole book is when his books get
I
destroyed,
mean,
for sure. For all of us.
hurt me.
Yeah.
That
I
was
wasn't going to say anything, but
Yeah.
So both of your books, talking about tension, both of your books treat tension in quite a different way, which is of course, the vibe is very different. Whether that's between characters, from opposing POVs in your case as well, Amie, or in yours, MK as well, or if the reader doesn't know who the damn murderer is. What were your favorite tense moments to write? And do you enjoy putting readers through all this heart palpitation inducing fear and angst? Okay,
I mean,
I'll start with
yes.
you because, yes,
the answer
I
is
guess.
yes. Like I said, I like writing tension. So and I feel bad when people are reading and they're messaging me and they're like, "You better not do what I think you're gonna do." I'm like, "I don't know what you're thinking, but I'll probably do it."
Yeah.
So I think my favorite scene in the book is there's a moment where Damien tells Roz kind of the main reason for the guilt that he feels, and it's the first time he's telling her, but it's also the first time he's telling the reader. Like, he has all this guilt. That is clear from page 1 because he's very melodramatic. But now he's finally telling Roz the real reason that he feels this so intensely. Um, and so it's just a moment where there are so many big feelings between them, and it's sort of closer to the beginning. So it's where their paths have crossed and they've got all this anger and betrayal against one another or toward one another. And this is the moment where Roz finally blows up the way she has been wanting to for the first few chapters, and Damien finally lets out all his bad feelings. And I think that's just like the peak of their tension that drives them into the next part of the book. And so naturally, that was my favorite part to write because they were both having a really bad time and I was having a good time.
Man, kind of the isn't doesn't if one quote from this entire panel could sum up writing, it would be like, and I loved it because they were having a very bad time and I was having a good time because they could be readers,
Ta-da!
characters, anyone.
I know.
Tension. What do you think? I mean, the whole kind of back quarter of the book is one extremely tense experience, but I think in some ways that the tension that I enjoyed writing the most is the little bits of micro tension that continue on through chapters. So, you know, one that I would think of, because I'm jumping from point of view to point of view, I have to be able to get you back into it again. Is so Jude, my boy who ends up bare knuckle boxing, you know, and running errands for a gangster for a living, and Laskia, who is one of my gangsters, partnered up for trying to do evil deeds. And one of the reasons that Jude is in the book, like craft wise, is that Laskia doesn't always have a lot of insight into what she's doing and just how bad it is. And so Jude is partly there to show us that, to you know, be our eyes as he's like, this is a lot of murder. This is not good. And so I suppose the thing about Jude is he's kind of held hostage. The gang is paying for the doctor his mother needs, and his mother is dying, and the only way she's getting medical care is if he falls in with this gang. And so he can't just go, you know what, we've crossed a moral line here and leave. Like, that's not an option for him. She's very ill. She's not able to be moved, and he can't get her medical care any other way. And so I really enjoyed the tension between him and Laskia of him trying to sort of stay in with her, but also increasingly being like, this is not good. This is not right. I shouldn't be in this. Am I the only one who's seeing how far this is going? And not being able to say it. And her knowing that
horror moments,
yeah, he has some pretty stressful moments in the book. But I enjoy writing those sort of, you know, it's not a romantic tension and it's not even a chase tension, but it is two characters who you're like, something's coming at some point with this. And I can't see how it can possibly go well.
I feel like I love them both already. She's bad, he's sad. Perfect.
Right? I know. We seem so smiley, but yeah. Maybe that's why we're so happy. Because we just put all of our misery in.
Yeah, we've gotten it out.
We're self-actualized now.
Oh,
that's what that means.
And I'm just here suffering because I need to know what's next. By the way,
I mean,
segueing into my next question, can you tell us anything about the next installment at all?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm getting told off a bit for having a cliffhanger, and I actually think that anyone who's saying that clearly hasn't read Aurora Rising, the book that caused me to be hit with all caps anger on the internet.
I'm getting
every single day.
I'm getting some really, 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 really intense movement from the team here. Thanks.
So yeah, right. Yeah, a cliffhanger that I massively underestimated and did not understand what was going to happen to me as a result. So I learned a valuable lesson from that, and I think this is much less cliffhangery.
I agree.
And, yeah, I also appreciate that it's only less cliffhangery on a scale. So, thing one I will say that everyone can expect from book 2 is a recap of book 1 in the front, because I do that in all my books, because whoever remembers what happened in the previous book. And I just feel like we all do this thing where we get book 2 and we're like, oh, I'm so pumped. I just don't quite remember everything. So I'll reread book 1 and then I'll get to book 2. And then you don't get to reread book 1 because there's new things to read. And then you don't pick up book 2 and all these series go unfinished. So recaps in the front of everything, which means it's safe to read now. The other thing that I will say people can look forward to is one of the places that is mentioned but never visited in book 1 is the bibliothèque. It is the greatest center of knowledge in the world. It's a university meets a library. It's built on a ruined country that was destroyed in the last War of the Gods, as a reminder of what will happen if that kind of knowledge is lost again. And it is inspired by the Morgan Library in New York and the Long Room at Trinity in Dublin and the State Library of Victoria here in Melbourne, and every cool library I've ever been to with domes and twisting staircases and dark wood, paneling. We get to go to the bibliothèque in book 2, and for once I have found something where I actually do write the description first time because I'm having so much fun.
That sounds so fun. I can't wait.
That does
MK, tell us.
Actually, it's so funny that you say that because I was thinking about what Amie said earlier, where she's like, we have such similar vibes to our books, but they're also so different. My sequel also has kind of a big library type center of knowledge, except it's the kind of knowledge where, like, if you read something in there, you want to learn more and more, so it traps you, and then you just wander around till you starve and die, and there's just bodies in there. Because I'm stable.
Again, quite different, yeah.
Yeah, the vibes are still there.
Right? We have the same kind of ideas, but yeah, just not really executed the same way.
No.
Yeah, so that is one of the places, but
this is what leads people to think I'm so nice.
I'm
not doing that kind of thing. Yeah, I've been getting a lot of apology letters from people reading Isles, being like, "I'm so sorry. All these years I thought it was Jay doing the murder, and now I realize." And I'm like, "We told you." But go on about the Spiderweb Library, please.
That doesn't surprise me. Okay, well, that's all I was going to say about that because I didn't want to spoil anything else. But in terms of the rest of the book, what people can expect, there is more of a group cast in this one. Like I said, book 1 was very Roz and Damien. And there used to be a lot more group scenes, or at least scenes with their friends, but they had to get cut because they were not driving the plot enough, sadly. But some of them made it into the next book, so you can expect that. They are on a boat in the next book, which I do not know a lot about, so my poor copy editor was flagging a lot of things about boats. Why did I do that? We'll never know. But they are going to the north, to the area that is occupied by their enemies, in book 1. And they are going there. I don't know if I can say why they're going there yet. I won't say why they're
For
going
reasons.
there. They're going there. So it's kind of leaving the heart of the city where most of book 1 took place and branching out into the rest of the world a little bit. It has one of my favorite tropes, which is the soft boy becoming unhinged. So that was very fun for me. And then it has Roz kind of having to face the fact that she is what she is. That's kind of what she's going to come into as Damien unravels. And yeah, it's interesting because my first book was initially sold as a standalone. So I think some people have read it and been like, okay, this feels pretty wrapped up except for the epilogue. And that's because it was wrapped up. And then partway through working on that book and getting it ready to publish, I was essentially asked if I would be willing to write a book 2 because they felt it really served a 2-book series well. And that was my initial idea until it sold as 1 book. And then I revised it to be 1 book. So if you feel like, wow, this really wraps up, but then there's an epilogue where it doesn't, that's because I got a book 2 later than most people normally do. But I think it is worth going into the next book after you read the epilogue because it does end on kind of a weird vibe that will be explained. So
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does.
Sorry.
So, well, it makes me just excited about the next book. So on both of your cases, I was like, where's the next one? Right now, eyeballs, I need it. So, I mean, that's a nice thing to have as a reader, isn't it? So
I was probably crying over it at the time, so
yeah. So you actually mentioned soft boys with trauma and self-doubt, ha ha ha, and the hardened girls who love them. Being an author or creative is a challenging path. Like, can we kind of maybe talk about that? How do you deal with any struggles in your publishing path so far? I know that you're in quite different parts of your career, but I'm just wondering how you kind of deal with that. And if you have any tips.
I want to hear Amy's advice.
Come on, Amy, share your wisdom.
No, this is something I've been thinking very deeply about. So I'm actually I'm putting together a course that I want to teach on it later in the year about living a deliberate, joyful, and sustainable creative life. Because I have many feelings on it, and yeah, like 21 books under contract, all the things that can go wrong at this point, almost all of them have. And I think the thing that I kind of come back to again and again and again is you have to find a way to love the process. Like you can't decide to be a movie maker because you're going to enjoy that one moment where you stand on the red carpet and everyone asks what you're wearing. And, you can't be, a runner fueled solely by that moment of getting across the finish line in first, because who knows if either of those things will ever happen. You have to love the journey. You can't write a book just so that when it comes out, everyone will tell you that it's the best thing they've ever read. Because, like, for sure, everyone will not say that for a start. And, some people will vehemently say the opposite, and they'll seek you out to do it. So you have to find a way to love the process. And for me, that is about letting in lots of inspiration and making sure very consciously that I fill my well and keep doing that. That's literally something I have woven into my weekly diary is, things that I know kind of keep my well full. And you have to make sure that you love what you're doing because, it's like I remember when I wrote my first thesis, I was a repeat university degree getter because I didn't want a real job. And I remember my supervisor said to me, you got to start out really loving it because there are going to be moments when that takes a real dip. And if you didn't start high, low will be very low. And I think that's true. I think you have to find a way to love the process. You have to, everyone always says, don't follow trends. And the reason they say don't follow trends is because it doesn't work. That by the time you have identified a trend, it is too late to start writing for it. But the real reason you shouldn't follow trends is because it's not what's coming from your heart, at risk of sounding a bit sappy. It's just you, trying to do something that you think will please other people. And that's never going to be a good enough reason to create something fantastic. Like all the stuff I've done that's been the most successful has been the weirdest, the stuff that no one thinks there's going to be a market for. And I think because it has come from that place of just absolutely loving it, that's what's made it work as well as it has. And in saying that, I don't discount, fabulous marketing campaigns and lots of other things that make books go. But I think for us as the writers, when we kind of go back and sit down and it's our desk and it's nothing but us and a page, the way that you overcome the many things that will go wrong is to love your process and also to just keep going when it's not great. Winston Churchill has turned out, historically speaking, to be an sometimes admirable but not great guy. But his famous quote, "When you're going through hell, keep going." Not quite into that. I think if you're going through hell, maybe stop and get some friends around you and figure out why it feels like hell. But to love what you're doing and keep doing it no matter what's going on around you would be the TLDR of that. That was a long answer. I feel very passionate about this stuff.
No, but it's like a great update to that quote, though, in my opinion. So
yeah.
Okay, how do you feel about that?
Yeah.
I feel inspired. I think a lot of people would say, like, yeah, it's obvious, you have to love it, but it's not actually that obvious. Like, before I published this book, I wrote a lot of other books, and some of them I completely wrote not really loving, and then I didn't even query them. I just got to the end and I was like, I don't like this enough to edit it, and I just wrote something else.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a waste of time. Like, it helped me become a writer, so in that sense, it's not, but it was a waste of my and I guess. And so yeah, to love what you're working on is so crucial. And like, I think there's a lot of times that as an author, especially once you have your first book come out and you are being tagged and stuff and you see what people think, you're like, okay, I have to change this and this and this in the next one so that more people like it. And I definitely fall for that sometimes because there are elements of my book that even writing it, I'm like, people are not gonna like this. I know that. And then you release it and people don't like that element. And you have to say, I wrote it because I wanted it in there. And you have to really decide if you're going to stick to what your vision was for your work or if you're going to take in all that outside noise. And it's hard to ignore sometimes. And so I guess that would take me to my main thing that I've learned from publishing, which is you have to let it suck. And I don't just mean like the book, I mean like you have to let all of it suck, all of publishing. Sometimes you feel terrible, and you have moments where you're like, why am I doing this? I'm not cut out for this. Like, you just, it really gets to you sometimes when, at least when you're first starting out, maybe it kind of rolls over you as you're further into it. But, and I think that
Would you
is,
like me to say that it does? Would that help?
that would make me feel better.
No, look, I mean, the thing is, it kind of does, but it still gets you sometimes. Of course it
Yeah.
does.
I mean, even what, 5 months in after releasing my book, like
Mm.
if somebody tagged me in something bad initially, I would be
Mm.
so heartbroken, and now I'm like, "Oh, well." So
Yeah.
it does get better, and it's honestly so amazing to see people reading your book that eventually you're kind of like, "You know what? The noise doesn't matter." But I think it's important that you don't feel bad for having those moments where you do wonder if you're cut out for it because it's so normal, and I think every author at any stage of writing feels it from, like, when you're plotting to when your book is out in the world.
Yep.
And I know at least for me, when I was getting query rejections and sub rejections and stuff like that, you almost don't wanna tell people because you feel like you're ridiculous for being as upset as you are, and you're not,
Yeah.
and everybody is that upset, even if they're not saying it, at least from the people I've talked to, like, everybody feels
Yeah.
that. And so I think what was really important for me as I moved along this process was just accepting that it's normal to feel like everything sucks and it will pass and everything won't suck again and you don't suck and it's fine.
Mm. Yeah. And that's when coming back to having writing that you love. That's the only thing you can control
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
is your writing.
It really keeps you going if you love
Mm.
it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you guys are doing great, by the way. You're tying into all my next questions. I feel like I have the easiest job today. Um, did you have a favorite book as a teenager? And how has that book influenced your taste in books, whether that's reading or writing, aka share your gushy nostalgic recommendations with us, please.
Oh man, how
Who
long
wants
do
to
you have?
start? Dun dun dun.
I know what I liked because I was completely a basic teen that was reading the stuff that was popular at the time. Like, I was super into The City of Bones and Cassandra Clare's books, and I was super into the Shiver series by Maggie Stiefvater, and I was super into Twilight. So I was the basic teen girl reading the popular books, and I think it was really I think when you're reading stuff like that, you're so enveloped in kind of at least I was, the reading culture of other people are reading the same things as you, and it's fun to talk about it, and it's exciting, and
Yeah.
you're waiting for the next book to come out. And I think that really contributed to me being excited about books and excited about writing and fantasy and stuff like that. Um,
Mhm.
and as a teen reading that kind of stuff, I know sometimes the stuff teen girls reads gets flack from people, and that makes me angry because I think everything that teen girls like, if they like it, it must be good because they are very judgmental sometimes. And I loved that kind of stuff.
Teenage girls and the things they love.
Yes, right? So I was a huge fan of those kind of books and just being so excited about them and being so excited about reading and fantasy and stuff like that. It really got me into the reading community and wanting to write my own books. Um, and yeah, I think they're still some of my favorites today just because they are so nostalgic. And I will not hear a bad word from people who don't like them because I remember how much I loved them and that was so important to me. And I think that just really makes me appreciate how much I want to give books to teens that they will feel that way about, hopefully. So, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. No, I will fight anyone who wants to take a swing at those books. I think, there's a whole panel to be had here about how, like, oh, it's fine to criticize it if teenage girls are into it, but if guys,
Mm,
30 and older are into it, well, that's just a passion.
it's
That must be art. Anyway, um,
Mm.
my my favorite stuff growing up, I grew up reading a lot of Tamara Pierce, Alana and the Tortal series, and it definitely winds its way through what I write today because I think the thing I loved most about those series was I say those series because, there's a bunch of different ones all set in the same world, was there's magic and, there's magical creatures and there's quests and there's whatever, but there's also these characters who feel like they could sit next to you in high school. They feel incredibly real. There's this great quote from The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, where one of the characters says, "Adventures are never very much fun when you're having them." And it's kind of like the vibe I bring to a lot of stuff I write, that, in Isles, they reflect upon the fact that people in stories always seem to have it way more together and not be nearly as scared, stressed and sweaty as everyone experiencing this current adventure are. And that was a very Tamara Pierce vibe for me, the, very real people in fantasy settings. So that'd be my biggest nostalgic pick, I think.
I loved her too. I should have said that.
I mean, I think, if you lined up 10, if you lined up 10 YA authors and asked for their influences, I think she'd get a podium finish for just about everybody. So it's a given.
And finally, before we go to some quick fire questions, are there any books that you wish you'd written? Is there a book that you think, if only that was me? Can you pick a favorite? I mean, or a top 3?
I feel like I wouldn't want to change a thing about the ones that I love. I wouldn't want to mess it up by trying to write it myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I could pick books that I wish I knew how to write, if that makes sense.
Or ideas that I wish I had first. I don't write a favorite because I love it.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, you know what? No, I'd love to have written Twilight. Then we'd all be at my mansion right now. It'd be amazing.
Yes, please.
I would love what came along with having written a certain book. I just feel like it would have ended up differently. There would have been a lot more bloodshed. I might have ruined it.
Okay, so any others? Maybe?
No, I just tend to envy books. The ones I've read recently that I feel that way about are A Hunger of Thorns by Lily Wilkinson and Nightbirds by Kate J. Armstrong. They are 2 books that have this incredibly lush description, which is not a thing that is firmly in my wheelhouse. They're the type of books that when I read them, I think, God, I wish I could write that. So, I don't wish I had written them because they, I should say, be very different, but I wish I could.
I read things and think, I wish
there is time.
Yeah, we're young.
All right. So we are going to close off with 5 quick fire questions. What's your favorite word?
Fiasco.
Catonic.
I feel like this is going to be the vibes of your book just personified, isn't it? And what's your least favorite word?
In life or when I read it in a book? Because I don't like when people say moist. I don't like moist, squelchy, those kind of things.
You are not alone, actually.
Yeah.
I've interviewed a couple of authors that don't like that one.
Yeah, I don't like thinking about them, but I have to concede they do their jobs.
I do like to use them when it's gross.
Yeah.
It's the mouthfeel.
No.
Understandable. Next one. If you were a cookie, which cookie would you be? This is a Damn It special from our Camp YA team.
A smart cookie. No, I don't know. I couldn't resist saying that.
I love it. Yes, that was excellent.
Yeah, I got nothing. I don't know. I'd be like the one with all the extras. I'd be like a choc chip triple fudge chunk with sprinkles on top. And the whole shebang. Yeah.
Yum.
It would be,
you know what,
yeah, what cookie would you be, Karen?
I don't know what I'd be. Something with chocolate. I'm a Belgian. I'm very predictable that way.
They have good chocolate
that makes it all better.
We do. It'd be literally more chocolate than cookie, really, to be honest. So, and Next one. What's a character trait in a character you love to read or write?
Seeming to be really cocky and on the inside being squishy and vulnerable.
Yeah.
Cinnamon roll. Yeah.
Soft bad boy. I love a character who's argumentative, and I know some people do not, but I do. I love a character who like they run up against authority and they're like, absolutely not. And those are my favorite.
Well, yeah, again, sounds really good to me. And then we're nearly there. Which of your characters would you very much not like to wake up a saint or god? Maybe different from like if we stay outside of the actual plot line.
Gonna say, because like the villain is an obvious answer. She would just do
Yeah.
terrible things to everyone.
But who else would be really, really bad at it?
I feel like Roz would not have good impulse control.
Yeah, you know what? We were going the same direction. I was like, I feel like Prince Leander would not have great attention span,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
that's not good. Yeah. I feel like with someone who's got that level of power, what you really want is focus.
Yeah. That's why I don't want power.
And finally, which book would you recommend to everyone?
Oh, that's a hard question. There's so many and it
You
changes.
can't pick your own though. You can't pick your own because that would,
Yeah.
I do not recommend my own to everyone, actually. I definitely don't.
No, let them figure that out themselves. I'll go first. I'll give you a second. I'm going to recommend something that's totally different to what either of us are writing, on the assumption that everyone's now rushing out to read our books and therefore needs to fill a different category.
Yeah, duh.
I am going to recommend Dark Hearts by James Sutter, which is, if it is not on your radar, get it there. Let me pitch it to you. 3 boys form a band and then have a falling out. One leaves, and shortly thereafter, the other 2 become super mega rock star famous. Then we move forward to when the book actually begins. One of the 2 in the successful band dies, and the one who was left behind and the one who's still alive have a chance to reconnect, and maybe a chance to reconnect. And it is funny and real and vulnerable and has a beautiful portrayal of like, wait a minute, did I just assume that I was straight? And it's great. It's beautiful. It's full of heart. I loved it.
Read it, everybody. Yay!
Oh yeah, Dark Hearts by James Sutter. Everyone go read it. It just came out.
I'm gonna write it down. I'm gonna branch off slightly too, and this is only because I happen to be reading the follow-up book right now. But it would be Mindwalker by Kate Dillon, because I feel like it is such a perfect, like, it's complicated sci-fi, kind of like Amie writes, but like in a way that's so accessible. And I would recommend Amie's books because I love them, but I feel like that's cheating. But I read this Mindwalker book and I absolutely could not put it down. I'm sorry if you hear the fire truck in the background. And I think
What have you done?
I know.
They're coming for you.
It's a book that I recommend to like all of my friends that are like, I'm not sure if I like evil technology and like the dangers of big corporations and stuff like that. And I'm like, you need to read this because it's so fast paced and it's just so fun and it's cool and it makes complicated tech stuff simple. And I am not good at any of that. And so I read it recently and now I'm reading the follow up. And it's just I really love it. So that is what I'm recommending to people right now that happens to be at the top of my mind.
Ta-da! Ladies, people, gentlemen, awesome people, we did it! Ooh, thank you so much for joining us for this fantastic panel with Amie Kaufman and MK Lobb. Thank you so much both for being here and for filming with us.
What a pleasure.
Please stay around the campfire and hang out with us. And thank you all at home for watching. Bye.